Welcome to Update 1. We're going to go through the new features of this 1.4 Update 1 release. The big feature is Access Zone Failover, so I'm going to spend most of the time on that. And before we get started, let's take a look at the cluster we're going to use. So in this example, we're going to walk through an Access Zone Failover, and we're going to focus on this one here called Data. So there's the path. Look at the networking. So it's required to have an IP pool assigned to the access zone. So here you can see the membership. And this is the user mountable Smart Connect zone that we're going to fail over, userdata.81.test. You can have more than one IP pool. For this example, I just have the one. So this is the source or production cluster, and the other tab is the target replication cluster we're going to fail over to. So if we move over to Eyeglass, let's take a look at what's discovered. So this has already been set up ahead of time. We'll start here at your dashboard. And so zone readiness looks the same, but it's been changed quite a bit. So view map, we've simplified the way the hints are done. Hints are aliases on IP pools that map one from a source cluster to a target. You'll see here IGLS dash anything dash some description. The only mandatory part of the hint is dash IGLS dash some unique variable, number, character, and that's it. I've added the extra dash and a description, which is optional. We also simplified it. They're mirrors. Whatever you do on IP pool on production, it's the exact same hint on the target. So we match up IGLS-user, IGLS-user, and that creates the mapping. If you take a look at the ignore flag, why it exists, it's the same, IGLS-ignore. This tells Eyeglass this pool is used for SyncIQ, not for users to mount, and it doesn't need to fail over. So let's see what the status of this access zone looks like. Quite a few additions here. There's a lot of additional checks that get done. You'll see these are all validations that tell you if you're okay to fail over. Only supporting hot, cold configurations, so we check to make sure you're not in an invalid configuration. We also validate that the SyncIQ policies use the restrict from source best practice. We also make sure that the SyncIQ policies you're attempting to fail over actually belong to the access zone. And this is done based on path. So SyncIQ policies should have a common path to the access zone. Otherwise, they'll be considered external and won't be failed over. Diverse path, this means you've got an access zone going from cluster A to B. You can't go from A to B and A to C. That's not supported. And additional checks that you can see here. Config replications checked, service principal names are checked. It actually breaks out the domain and tells you what's missing. It also remediates, so that's been there for a while, but it will remediate any SPNs that are missing per access zone. The mappings, they're all validated. And the zone update status. We also check that the source target are reachable. You need to be able to reach the clusters from Eyeglass before it's okay to attempt to fail over. So this zone looks like it's okay to fail over. It's currently failed over, and it's running on cluster 2. So all the data, all the user access. So if we look at the user map, you can see that there's, on cluster 2, there was an access zone that existed. It's been failed over. So we're going to go ahead and start the failover job and take a look at the differences there. So access zone is now an option. we'll pick the access zone on the cluster I want to fail over. I should point out that you can have multiple access zones, and you can have cluster A active for one access zone and cluster B active for a different access zone. You can't split an access zone between clusters. So new options in failover, we can see data sync. We typically run SyncIQ before failover. If you don't want to, you unselect. If you want to check for any configuration changes during failover, you can uncheck. The default is checked. Controlled, uncontrolled is the same. So we see all access zones that are in a good state are available. You can check the mapping and any warnings if there are any. Next, validates it's okay to continue. Select the start, and that's it. So this is really no different than any other workflow for any other type of failover. But what happens is different, so let's take a look at what's happening in the logs. So opening this up, you can see I'm running all steps, so I'm going to run config replication. You can, of course, break out the future tasks that are going to run. So while it's starting up, some convenience features. You can launch OneFS UI right from here. Service principal names are shown. And let's take a look at Script Editor. So Script Editor is a way to script within Eyeglass. You can test function down here. See, it shows the output of your scripts as if you actually failed over without actually failing over. We also provide variables. Here are some examples where we pass in JSON encoded values for cluster IP address, passwords, user IDs, simplifying your scripts to leverage encrypted credentials stored in the appliance. You can also select the failover type, so you can take logic steps depending on the failover type, specific logic for information about the access zone or the policy name itself. We'll be supporting Node.js, Bash, and Python. There's examples of each of them and how the variables can be used in the library. But you can also create new scripts, curl. You could add other libraries to the appliance and use different languages if you needed to. Let's take a look at how we test a script. Let me test that one. Let's try this one. Just to show an example, it'll run the script. We're not actually failing over, but it would run through all the logic. So if you've got DNS things that are happening, you can see the types of output that get sent back for debugging purposes. So once you're happy with your script, you select the script and where it's applicable. So if I select per SyncIQ, that means this will run every time for all SyncIQ failover tasks. I can make it run for access zones, DFS mode. Some of the things you might be able to do with this, you should be able to do DNS if you've got an API-driven DNS system, such as InfoBlocks. We've got a solution guide for that. For NFS, there's unmount, remount potential on Linux hosts. We'll be publishing scripts and guides on how to do unmount, remount, and have a seamless failover, much like DFS works today. So I'm going to go back and check on our failover job. It looks like everything completed, so let's take a look at the log and see what happened. So I'll highlight some of the key steps. So it looks like run configuration, we ran that. We ran the data sync. Now all the networking changes happen. Because of service principal names, we rename the original Smart Connect zone. Otherwise, you'll get a collision in Active Directory. So that's what's happening here. On the target, we had a temporary Smart Connect zone, so it's going to get deleted. We're going to delete the service principal name from Active Directory. We just did that here. Did it for this zone as well. Now we're going to create the alias. So this is the act of moving a Smart Connect zone from A to B cluster. So let's create that alias based on the pool-to-pool mapping. Another rename of a zone to avoid collisions. Create the SPN. Create the other SPN. We check for quotas. Any quotas, run the failover quotas. Does a create on B cluster and a delete on the source. We then remove the SyncIQ policy schedule, apply it to the new mirror policy, the allow rights are done on that policy. Remember, I could have more than one access zone policy being failover in one failover job. We now run the policy, make sure we can replicate data back to the original cluster, apply the schedule. If we need to, we can protect that configuration here. And I'm just scanning down. Quotas are done. The mirror policy gets created if it's the first time you failed over, so you have to go into Eyeglass and enable the config replication job. Everything's a discrete action, so you have to formally go in and enable that to be able to fail back or sync your configuration back. We also check if we need to roll back networking. The first policy of one or more that successfully implements the make writable is failed over, then that's the point of no return. There's no way back. If make writable fails, then all the Smart Connect zone changes are rolled back automatically, restoring data access on the original cluster. That's automatic. There's no user actions to take. So here we can see more of the pool aliasing being done, and it tells you exactly which DNS records need to be updated. And this, of course, is from the subnet IP that's extracted. It's visible in the dashboard, and the DNS step is manual. Now, if I was using a scriptable DNS, I could quite simply just have a script that goes out to DNS, issues an API call, switches the CNAME from one A record to another, and now I've failed over my entire access zone. All my Smart Connect mounts, any SMB, NFS would now be accessible. I should point out, one of the challenges with DNS-based failover is DNS caching. So you can't ignore DNS caches on Linux and Windows hosts, but from the storage layer, everything's failed over. So hopefully you could see that this is as simple as DFS mode or per SyncIQ, the flexibility of script engine, quite a few possibilities in scripting application shutdowns, mount, unmount, look for more updates on solutions around Linux failover that we'll be publishing. But now you've got a third choice to design failover. You can see here, source node restriction. It flagged the mirror policy as not having source node restriction. And we've now completely failed over. You can fail over with an access zone in a warning state. You cannot in an error state. You'll be blocked from failing over until any of the errors are corrected. So typically you would go in and make changes, trying fixing whatever issues causing the block condition. And then you can just run readiness whenever you want, and it'll rescan. It's fairly quick. Less than 30 seconds. It'll scan all the things that need to be checked and update the dashboard and let you know if everything's good to go. So, Look forward to a few more solutions as we roll out new features, but hopefully this gives you a good idea of Access Zone Failover and how simple it can be to failover access zones with Eyeglass 1.4 Update 1. Thanks for watching.